Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where we discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today we're looking at Shadowrift from Starling Games. Quick disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this game. Shadowrift is one of the first games in a genre I really enjoyed, deck-building town defense games. I had never played it before, but Colin recommended it highly, and Jason Perez from Every Night is Game Night was nice enough to teach it to us. But in a field with heavy hitters like Aeon's End, does Shadowrift rise above the pack? Let's find out and get to the list. My number 5 is a pro, and that's the variety of enemies you face in the game. In just the base box, you get a bunch of different enemy armies, and they have 20 unique unit cards with special powers, and they each have a unique secondary deck that has some kind of special effect it has on your characters. They give each play its own thematic and mechanical flavor, increasing the replayability of the game. My number 4 is also a big pro, and that's the villager deck that makes up the town you're trying to defend. Unlike other games in this genre, Shadowrift doesn't just treat the town as a number that slowly ticks down. You have actual villagers that will be killed and fill the town with corpses, and you have the tension of flipping over the cards each turn and seeing if you survive or die, because the villagers are your lose condition. It gives great thematic weight to your decisions. It provides a lot of fun interactions with player powers and enemy powers like necromancers that bring dead villagers back to life. And it also creates cool resource management decisions, because you can hire new villagers to come into your town and boost your flagging population. But both the enemies and the villagers are things that mostly run themselves. When we get to number 3, our first one that's heavily in the player interaction with the game, it's a mix. Shadowrift is a full-on deck builder, but the deck building inside the game has its pluses and minuses. On the positive side, they have some nice differences in the types of cards you can play. This mix of card types and how they interact with each other, and also your generic options of resource-generating cards, can give you a lot of cool choices as you build your deck. But on the negative side, there's no culling in the game, there's barely any card draw, so you're really at the mercy of what you draw in your hand to see what you can actually do for a turn. And also in the games I've played, the pool of other things to spend your resources on, the feeling that some cards are better than others, and the need to get cards like seals so you can actually shut down the Shadowrifts and win the game, makes me feel like I don't actually deck build that much. I don't usually add a ton of cards to my deck, which is a little bit of a missed opportunity. But that goes right into my number 2, which is another pro, and those are the tough choices you have in terms of spending your resources on your turn. And even though I mentioned the many options as a negative for the deck building, it's a positive for the gameplay overall, because you have to decide if you want to buy villagers, or walls, or new cards, or more resources, or seals to take care of the Shadowrifts. Beyond that, you'll often have several enemies you can target, you'll have wounds in your hand, you can choose to discard or not by spending prowess. I'm not saying Shadowrift gives you a feeling like Mage Knight of having some amazing puzzle to solve every turn, but it does give you interesting choices, and that's enough to ask for a fairly straightforward deck builder like this. But unfortunately, we are getting into my only full-on con for the game at number 1, and that's the endgame and the victory conditions. To win Shadowrift, you have to either build 8 walls, or you have to seal all the Shadowrifts, 1 per player. And our first big negative here is that sealing the Shadowrifts is so much easier. It's fairly inexpensive, just buying a 4-cost seal card and some other magic to boost it. But that being the better victory condition also gives the game a ton of swinginess, because these are randomly shuffled into the top and bottom half of the deck, and if it's the bottom card of the deck, it'll be a much tougher and longer game than if it's one of the top cards of the deck. Add on to that a problem of ramp up. Sometimes the game is ridiculously tough, almost unwinnable at the beginning, because a lot of cheap cards come out and boost the power generation early. Other games you get things under control and the middle feels almost boring while you just kind of wait for the Shadowrift to show up. But the final biggest issue with the endgame is that it's not exciting. In almost all of my games, it was really obvious whether I was going to win or lose pretty early on. I honestly think, taking a cue from other cooperative deck builders, this is a game that would have benefited greatly from some big boss that you had to defeat, instead of just a few cards you had to clear away. Overall, I think Shadowrift is a worthy deck builder with some incredibly unique ideas that I wish would be copied. I'm especially thinking of the town deck and the villagers, so thematic, so interesting in terms of gameplay. I wish I had this in other places. But for me at least, Shadowrift has been eclipsed by other later deck builders, especially Attack on Greyport and Aeon's End. I think those games are more streamlined and, let's face it, more fun, and they still have interesting decisions on their turn, just like Shadowrift. Now that being said, if you love deck builders, I would definitely try to play Shadowrift and maybe pick it up. It's got some really cool ideas, some great variety, and especially if you throw some expansions in, you can have numerous playthroughs never seeing the same stuff. But if you aren't a fan of deck builders, if the fairly weakish endgame bothers you, or if you already own Aeon's End or one of the other newer deck builders, I'm not sure Shadowrift is going to hit it for you, so definitely caution if you buy. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.